Man, the Ringley Brothers Barnum and Bailey circus ain't got nothing on the White House. This circus is playing out worldwide.
The EMTIs or EMTs, what?
The paramedics.
Every one of them that was in there that worked on my wife, I feel that they done everything in their power to what they could do.
I mean, I don't blame anybody that worked on Mama. They did what they were supposed to do. But it's the fact nobody has the right to say, well, my mother would not have made it.
She didn't have the opportunity because Belhaven was closed.
That's right.
See, because there was nothing in Belhaven.
If we were the first ones to have this problem for Belhaven being going, who's going to be next?
Exactly.
Welcome back to another episode of Thesis of the World. Let's get right into it and talk about a part of community that is often overlooked. Overlooked when it comes to roads, rebuilding from natural disasters, internet, and fast law enforcement response. With this administration, this community is having a brighter spotlight of how much they have been forgotten and not deemed as important. This problem did not start with this administration. In the past, a Band-Aid has been placed on a system that was decaying and literally slowly taking the life out of citizens, but what's happening now will be devastating to the rural areas. We are seeing time and time again how this administration has zero empathy, zero concern for the citizens. There is no sugarcoating what is happening. Their main concern is padding the pockets of the rich and smothering the poor and middle class by the cutting, withholding and dismantling of services, funding, and grants. Rural America is dying. A term called golden hour, which refers to the concept of trauma, which in the first hour, 3 things should occur. 1. First responders arrive on the scene, evaluates and transport 2. Diagnostics test at treating medical facility. 3. Stabilization. The golden hour is important because it has shown that the longer it takes to get the patient from the accident scene to the treating facility that could handle the critical incident has a direct correlation to the mortality rate. We first grasp the critical meaning of what healthcare professionals call the golden hour. In 2014, when Portia Gibbs died waiting for air transport to a trauma center after the only hospital near her home in Belhaven, North Carolina was shuttered. In medical emergencies, especially heart attacks or strokes, what happens in the first hour often determines whether someone survives or not. That vital hour is known as the golden hour. Portia never got hers. Her chance at survival was lost, not to fate, but to lawmakers who, for 10 years, refused to accept Medicaid expansion in North Carolina. In losing her, the community lost more than a patient. They lost a neighbor, a friend, a mother. And now, members of Congress, many from rural areas themselves, must choose whether they too will risk their own constituents' golden hours for what's being called the Golden Dome. A $100 billion spike in military spending that the White House is seeking to pass through the Senate by way of reconciliations skirting the usual 60-vote hurdle. Currently, the full federal funding package is stuck in the House Budget Committee. Far-right legislators are holding the process hostage, demanding deeper cuts that would gut vital programs. According to an in-depth analysis from the Institute for Policy Studies, the consequences would be catastrophic, especially for healthcare access in underserved communities. The future of this bill may hinge on whether a few Republican lawmakers from rural districts will protect their communities or sacrifice them for political gain. Proposed reductions to Medicaid and cost-sharing subsidies would eliminate health coverage for an estimated 13.7 million Americans, many of whom are low income, elderly, or disabled. From the start, activists have maintained that this budget isn't just about dollars and deficits, it's about morality. In the Energy and Commerce Committee, Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reminded colleagues that this isn't only about the poor. It's about everyone in rural towns who rely on the one hospital nearby. If that closes, it could mean life or death. The network of small rural hospitals, officially termed critical access hospitals, was created under the Hill-Burton Act of 1946 during Harry Truman's presidency. Their purpose was clear: make emergency health care reachable in remote parts of the country. Because these hospitals don't serve the dense populations of urban centers, they often depend on government support to operate. It was well understood by policymakers that subsidies were necessary to preserve them. The Affordable Care Act, ACA, passed in 2010, anticipated this need and ensured that funding would follow patients through Medicaid expansion. It was a strategy rooted in conservative ideals, market-driven, decentralized, and tied to consumer access. But when opponents started calling it Obamacare, the name itself became a weapon. Right-wing backlash, driven by Tea Party fervor, led Republican-controlled legislatures in many states to reject federal Medicaid dollars. The result? Those who should have qualified for Medicaid were denied access. Of those, a large proportion of those were white. But regardless of race, they lived in places where their hospitals starved of the funds the ACA was supposed to provide could no longer keep their doors open. Regardless of party affiliation, one thing that should be universal and no debating is everyone deserves equal access to medical care. This is about basic human decency. Healthcare access is a right. Still, in rural counties, doors and services were no longer accessible with reasonable commute time. People were dying in parking lots, in open fields that could be accessible for a helicopter to land and airlift them to a facility. The media coverage of Portia Gibbs out of North Carolina gained national media coverage. Days after the hospital closed, Portia Gibbs became the first person to pay the price. 48 years old, a wife and mother of 3, Portia was working outside with her husband Barry, a military veteran and school janitor, when she began feeling unwell. Barry saw her sit down on the porch and went to check on her. She mentioned that her blood sugar had dropped, so he brought her a honey bun, but soon after, she clutched her chest in pain. Alarmed, Barry called their son and rushed her to the nearest EMS station. The paramedics worked to stabilize her, then prepared to call in a helicopter. Barry followed as the ambulance sped to the high school parking lot. There, he waited, over 45 agonizing minutes, as emergency responders struggled to keep Portia alive. They had to revive her multiple times. A longtime doctor from Belhaven, consulted by phone, offered little hope. By the time the helicopter arrived, there was nothing more to be done. Take a listen to her husband.
And the EMTI come out there, and he said, Barry, he says, we've done all we can do. He says, we've got her back 4 or 5 times, and her heart just can't take it. And he said, we've called the doctor, Dr. Bowitt, and he said, we just need to call it and let her go.
Pain is real. There are real victims behind inequalities. But we've allowed this administration to twist diversity, equity, and inclusion as if it's an epithet, when in reality, it covers the entire facet of ensuring democracy for all.
But at any rate, the helicopter landed. They come over there, and the EMTI guy come back out there and told me, he said, Barry, she's gone. Hours going by. I don't know. The good Lord's the only one that knows if she can make it. But at the same token, if they could have been working on her and left, the only one knows is the good Lord whether she'd have made it or not. But we didn't have the chance. We don't have that chance no more than if she could make it. And without having an emergency, then they're wanting to say, and everything I'm getting is what I'm getting is hearsay. I haven't cut a television on since Monday. The EMTs and the EMTIs, I do not fault them one bit. I feel like they done everything earthly possible that they could do in their means. I have understood that people have said that we have blamed them or whatever, or said that they didn't. I don't know where that come from, but I commend them for doing all they could do. I understand the protocol. I know there's a protocol, but with us being so far away from everything and not having an emergency room here, my wife's dead. And I won't have that chance of knowing. But I don't want them. I don't want somebody else to have to go through this.
Portia Gibbs died waiting, not just for transport, but for the kind of health care she should have had close to home. Her death was not unforeseen. It wasn't a tragic oversight. It was the exact outcome we had warned about. Protesters had marched, clergy had prayed, citizens had been arrested, demanding Medicaid expansion. The Republican mayor stood on the steps of the State House and told his own party that inaction would cost lives. Portia's death didn't fall through the cracks. This wasn't a bureaucratic failure. It was a political one. And it cost her life. It was, in the truest sense, policy-induced homicide. Now, rural Republican lawmakers in the House must make their own decision. Will they choose to protect their constituents' golden hour? Or will they trade it away for a military budget designed to reward billionaire defense contractors? The so-called Golden Dome is gleaming, but it casts a long shadow over rural America. Activists and voters have insisted, since this budget debate began, the stakes are not only financial, they are moral. What happens next depends on whether just a few people in power decide to honor the oath they took to serve and protect all Americans, not just the wealthy or the well-connected, but the poor, the sick, and the forgotten. We must continue to protest, contact your representatives, and hold them accountable and to the fire, in that they will find the moral clarity to act before another golden hour is lost. We shouldn't let either party off the hook, nor put the blame solely on one party. However, with the Trump administration, we see more than ever just how the poor and middle class is simply not a priority. We need to start voting and electing politicians that will have the interest of all and not just the 1% of wealth earners. We all have some soul searching to do. The midterms must be a vote for those who will represent our interest and not our emotions of hate and bigotry. I come from the roots of rural America, where the dirt is so red it tints the darkest of colored clothes with a hint of red. Some of y'all can relate to that. Where riding on four-wheelers and on the back of a pickup trucks was as common as sleeping with the doors unlocked, as the chickens scratched underneath the house at night, where the planks were not butted tight together, and you can see a little daylight through the floor. Everyone knew one another, and all the kids played together without any strife or animosity. We had neighbors who were different and somewhat strange, yet we treated them with dignity, kindness, and respect. America is definitely going through it right now, but we must continue to fight, and this midterm, let's elect politicians that will bring some light into this very dark time for all. If you stayed with me this long, I have a simple ask. Like and subscribe and support independent content creators. The only way for YouTube to push platforms is with viewer support. We all have a role to play in saving democracy. You may not be able to take part in peaceful protest or do any of the other rigors of activism, and that is okay. Just talking to a relative, a friend or neighbor about how things are going and what needs to happen to get us back to stability. Have those open conversations that will get us out of this chaotic, stressful, everyday wake up, wondering what is going to happen today, what rights are going to be under fire today, what college student will be arrested, what law firms will have their hands tied, what American will be deported, what immigrant will be deported with no criminal history, what corruption will be revealed, what secrets being leaked, what agency being gutted, what social programs being cut, all of craziness. The overwhelming amount of disinformation as opposed to the truth-saturated social media platforms. Your support for not only this channel, but for other channels like iHip, Reese Waters, Media's Touch, Legal AF, Roland Martin, Don Lemon, and a host of others, way too many to list. So please don't be offended if I did not cover all. They are all valuable. We must match and triple our social media presence to compete with those platforms that are promoting disinformation, hate, and bigotry. So if you have not done so, hit like and subscribe. No matter how heavy and volatile the world is currently, thoughts, reflection, respect always carry us home. So as we come in for the soft landing, hard truths, cold conversations, but always peace at the end, remember, stand up, speak up, and let the voices of freedom break the silence. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Thesis of the World. Until we meet again, stay in the fight.